So, welcome to another Sunlit Missions Coffee Cast. We're here today with Mr. Ron Widbin, the man, the myth, the legend.
Oh, it's a myth. It's a myth.
So, want to tell us a little bit about your background, just in general, because I think it really plays into your story a little bit. Just give us the quick synopsis.
I guess it does in a way, and in a way it doesn't. I grew up St. Louis, Missouri, preacher's kid, and all that
PK.
entails. I was a typical PK, middle son of three boys. Excuse me. And I was the rebel of the group. Went through all the routine. Went to all church pretty much 3 or 4 times a week. Was there when the missionaries would drop by and bring their slideshows and send their messages and tell their stories. And that was the worst part of my childhood was another missionary coming to town. That means we're going to have to sit at the table, talk to them, eat everything that's put in front of us, and listen to their stories. And that was the last thing in the world I ever wanted to do with my life. So went off, taught school for years, elementary school, met my wife there, Sally, went on to high school here in Columbia, coached baseball for 13 years at Rockbridge, was really totally into that. Had a good life, did the TV thing for 30 years at the ABC affiliate here in Columbia, told the fun stories, the happy stories, I thought the meaningful stories. And then went down to Guatemala one summer because my wife kept trying to get rid of me for you need to get away from here for a week. A break. You need a break. Got down there and gosh, God just kind of like totally upended me. Turned me into something I never wanted to be. A missionary, like whatever that means.
So, what was it about? What prompted that trip, first of all? I mean, you say it was to get away, but was there something else involved in that, or was it really just, well, I'll get out of the country and go see this place?
Yeah, I think at the time, going with the guys, I didn't know any of them, maybe one. And basically, like Sally says, it was like sending your little kids off to summer camp. You don't know anybody. They seal your name in all your underwear and stuff like that, so you don't, in your socks, so you don't lose anything. That's the way I felt. And she just wanted to say, I think you need to get away from the stress. It was a tough baseball season, and it builds up and builds up. Just get away for a while. And she was really the one that kept prompting me. And I went down there, like, oh, it's a nice place, but boy, I never want to live here. And then, like the third day in, we dropped some food off at a lady's house, adobe hut. Had 4 beautiful daughters, dirt poor, had nothing to look forward to. She was just depressed. And we walked some food in, did our usual thing, and someone asked her that day, so what is it you need the most? I mean, do you need money to pay your rent? Do you need to send your money to send your kids to school? And she hesitated, with all those things going through her mind. She said, really what I need peace. I need peace about life. I don't know what it was about that moment, about that line, but it just I swear I'm not one of those people who hear voices, but I heard a voice that day in that little mud hut on the floor that day saying, you want peace? Isn't that what everybody's looking for? They want peace about life, about where they are, where God wants them to be. And I heard God say to me very specifically, you want peace, this is where you're going to find it, in Guatemala. No, you're thinking of my other brothers, my preacher brother, my seminary teacher brother, not me. No, you. So, boy, next thing I know, we're on our way. My wife was all on board with it. And,
so you came back from that trip, and
changed.
You were changed, and you had to come back and talk to Sally, your wife.
Yeah.
And then, what was her reaction when you first started talking a little bit about this?
I sat on it for 2 or 3 months, and finally she said, "Okay, what's on your mind? Something's going around in that empty head of yours that I can't put my finger on. What is it about? What are you thinking about?" So I said, I really think at this point, Sal, we have a choice. I have a choice. We can either continue on. We have a grandchild now, something we've been waiting for years for. I'll keep coaching baseball. You do whatever you're going to do for a while, and we'll retire. This is what retirement looks like for us. Or we can finish strong. And she said, what does finish strong mean? And I said, as crazy as this sounds, I think God's calling me to Guatemala. That's where he wants me now. And she hesitated very briefly, and she said, okay, Ron, when do we leave? I thought, okay, there's the final straw. That's really God putting his thumb on me and saying, did you pick up on that? This is where she wants to be. This is where I want her to be. Now, are you going to go along for the ride or what?
That's it, right? Then it's like, are you really going to follow through then at that point?
And it was, what was really crazy about it, Brad, is it made total sense. I mean, up until that point, it would have sounded stupid, crazy. Not me. But at that moment, it made total sense. And from that day on, like, it made total sense.
And that's been, what, 8, 9 years ago?
8.5 years.
8.5, 9 years or so ago.
Yeah, it's been, and we're there pretty much every day, living in Guatemala.
You picked up everything, basically kind of downsized, let's just call it.
Very much.
From the normal Columbia, Missouri lifestyle that you were leading. You pick up and you move to Guatemala.
Right.
And when you first get down there, what's kind of the overall mission that you felt like you were called to do down there?
And that's the crazy thing. We talked to so many missionaries, and I was always called to be a missionary. That's not us. And we got down there and we were kind of still saying, why are we here? Why are we here? They wanted me to do my video stories. I'm a storyteller, so tell your stories. And I did some of that, not a whole lot of it. Sally worked in a special needs school. She had no special needs training, but she was a teacher. I mean, she taught at the university, the whole elementary ed, all that kind of thing.
Right.
But that didn't seem to be what we were doing at the ministry where we latched onto. And then things kind of changed, and we got moved into mission teams, the American mission team thing, where we, brought teams in, took teams out,
right.
Made sure security was there, transportation, projects, all that kind of stuff. And then after about 3.5 years of that, God said, okay, now I've trained you. Now I'm really sending you out. You're going by yourselves, and you're going to do what I brought you here to do.
So talk a little bit about the traditional kind of mission trip that you talk about you originally started and what that's kind of like. But then I'd like to hear a little bit about how that sort of changed you, I think, after going through that for a while. You kind of saw what the traditional, maybe American mentality, I don't know if that's the right term, but
I'd say that's...
that whole thing of, okay, a mission team goes down, we meet and we go see some orphanages, we get some selfie pics with a kid or two. And
You're taking my lines, brother.
Well, I don't want to take words out of your mouth.
But
tell that story a little bit.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the way we saw it. And then, because I did it myself, there's a Christian comedian, John Christ, who does a great takeoff. Have you seen it?
Yes.
On mission teams, okay? And he's got the sombrero on, this and that and the other. Let's keep in mind what our purpose of this trip is, to get Facebook pictures so we can show ourselves with, little children and things like that. And that was kind of the way we kind of played it too. And then we'd bring teams in and take teams out. I mean, 26, 27 a year. It was physically the most tiring job I've ever had, that Sally has ever had too. It was long days. We'd go home, we had no food in the refrigerator because we'd forgotten we hadn't bought any. We didn't have time to. And and I remember after a period of time, they did their thing. We painted houses, we built houses, and did the mission team thing. And then I realized one day God really spoke to me. He said, listen, you need to take a hard look at this. And is this really what you think I have in store for these people? So what turned into, oh, thank you so much, folks, for coming. You're going to really do a lot for the poor Guatemalans. That blah, here we go with that same old speech. One day it just flipped, and I said, okay, we're glad you're here. You in fact can do a lot of things for the Guatemalans. You did bring money and things like that to build houses and things like that, but they can build it themselves. In fact, finding jobs for Guatemalans is what we became very much attuned to. I mean, we're not going to bring people down to do their jobs. They need the job. They need the dignity of putting in a good day's work, earning a salary so they can feed their families. I mean, right. What's Jesus telling about dignity and following him and making people feel like they're worth something? But then I'd go up in front of mission teams and I said, these people can build their own houses. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. The reason you're down here is not to help the Guatemalans. The reason you're down here is because God has something he wants to teach you. A lot of missionaries put down learning and serving in Guatemala. That sounds so wonderful. Oh, I'm such a servant. But after a while I realized, Sally, we're not down here to serve. We're down here to learn. We're not teaching them anything. They have seen Americans come and go. But what we're learning from them about survival, about what God says, don't worry about tomorrow. Today's got enough problems of itself. You're going to learn that in Guatemala. You see it every day. Like, okay, so what are we going to learn from it? So that's when we became, okay, we either teach the mission teams what we've learned or we move on. And it was time to move on and to something else. And God took us someplace else. But if you're on a mission team and you have an opportunity to go to another country, put the hammer down, put the saw down, put all that other stuff down for a few minutes as often as you can, and love on people. Forget the language barrier. It's there, but I mean, they know it when you hug them. They're not like Americans anymore. We still hug in Guatemala. They want to be touched physically, and they want to be smiled at, and they want to see the tears of pain coming out of your eyes because you can feel their pain. They want it that close. They want it personal, okay? But that's what we learned, and that's, had carried us on for the next 4.5 years. Like, okay, now we have something to share. Share it.
So you guys transitioned then from really being just kind of like I don't want to lighten what you were doing, but it was kind of like a tour coordinator almost, where you're taking people on tours and making sure they're safe and getting them from point A to point B. But you really, to me, in my eyes, you kind of transitioned then to being really almost a connector is kind of what I would kind of define you guys as. You were good at connecting not only people within the Guatemalan culture and who needed jobs and things to be done, but you were also connecting back to the States.
Right.
With funding and fundraising and all of those things. And you were kind of like would you say you were kind of like the intermediary or the person who was kind of help connecting and making sure boots on the ground sort of?
I would say so. Sally was working in an orphanage for years, teaching teachers to teach. She was starting libraries. We're still doing all that. And I was telling stories with my videos. That was our main job. But one thing we realized when we got down there, Brad, is so many missionaries, so many missions have the attitude of, you do your thing, we'll do ours. Let's not mix the two, and don't mess with our supporters. By all means, stay away from our supporters. But we realized as we left the first mission, we said, we've been called to go out and instead of keeping missions and ministries separate, we need to bring people together. I mean, whose kingdom are we working for here? Are we working for our ministries, our missions, or is it His kingdom? We're all supposed to be working together here. Why are we doubling up? Why are we double dipping on dental care or on eye care? You do dental, we'll do eye, and let's mix the two. That's hard to do down there because people just want to do their thing, and it's like, people, can we take a hard look here? But you're exactly right. Then God said, the last thing I want to do when I went down there is, God, I'll do anything you want me to do. Just don't ask me to ask for money or to raise funds. That's not who I am. You know what? That's who I've become, because people always say, and maybe you were going to get into this question eventually, Brad, but when people say, how can we help? How can we help? And our usual answer is, well, you can come down here and live with us in Guatemala. I don't think I'm ready for that. Okay, that's fine. That's not what God's calling you to do. Do you speak any Spanish? No, I don't really speak any Spanish, but that's okay too. But what you can do is, and I say this personally, he's reached out. Brad is sending, and his coworkers here are sending a young lady, an indigenous woman, the only indigenous woman in her class through medical school. Okay, that's lasting. That will make a difference because that young woman is going to go back to her community and work and heal and set up a clinic. That's lasting. That's what we've been taught to do. That's what God brought us down there to do, is to be a problem solver.
Right.
Guatemalans have a hard time being problem solvers. But I think that's exactly what our gift was. Like, okay, make this thing work. Just make it work. Bring people together, raise funds for them if they need them, and just come alongside. Let Guatemalans do it. A lot of American pastors want to go down there. Well, I want to go down there and preach for a week and train pastors. Train them to do what? Are you familiar with the culture? Do you have any idea what these men and women are doing out there in those villages up in these isolated communities? What they go through? Training them to do what? You have no idea what their lives are like and how they have to, speak to their congregation and the danger that they face every day. It's a dangerous place.
Yeah.
It is for everybody, but we want to, we're teachers. Sally and I are both teachers. So we went down there. We went down there to learn, and now we, as Sally said one time, she said, maybe it's time for us to go home and tell people what we've learned down here. Like, boy, that's a very deep comment. I said, and spot on too. So I guess that's why I'm here today, drinking your coffee with the fancy mugs from Sinlet Missions.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm doing right now. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's important is for people to know. One of the things I've always appreciated about you, Ron, is just how you don't mix words. You're a straight shooter. You tell it like it is.
Try to be.
You're all about the truth. And the truth is that we live a pretty comfortable lifestyle here, certainly by comparison. And having visited, I got an opportunity to see a glance of that. But really, it's people who are willing to reach deep down in their pocket and actually contribute. You don't want to go down and spend your years in Guatemala. That's fine, but there are ways they can help. The way they can help is write the checks to the places that can make a difference.
And that's a good point, Brad. And what really makes me feel comfortable about asking people for help in that area, because that I know that's a sacrifice. But you know what? We're all called to be, to give sacrificially. We are. I mean, it costs us, and it has to be hurt. And like you just said, we want to be comfortable. That's our biggest enemy, guys, is comfort. I want to be comfortable. I want to live doesn't God promise us a life of ease? No, he does not. Read your Bible, folks. It's all over there. But he gives us that opportunity, and a lot of times it's our checkbook.
Yeah.
And I was that way, Brad, before I went down there. I'd sit there at my desk here in comfortable Columbia, Missouri, and see what my bank account said, and I was consumed by it. Then he took me to Guatemala, and that just became, I won't say insignificant, but it took a real big drop down to my priority list. Like, gosh, these people are surviving, and I'm worried about, retirement or this, that, and the other. Do I have enough to buy a new car or things like that? And what we've been able to do, because I tell you what, too, Mid-Missouri is a very giving community. We call them international workers. I tend to go away from the missionary line a lot of times, but people have asked us, I need to go home with you sometime because your community must be full of people. I said, it is. It always has been. That's why it's always home to us. And Mid-Missouri has made a huge difference. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of food during COVID, during the volcanic eruption that killed thousands. Now we've had 2 hurricanes down there recently. Yeah. Whole communities wiped out. Pictures of people being dug out of the mud. These lifeless bodies and whole communities just being washed out. And now we're building again. We're building, we're taking food. But again, at the same time, we're doing that eternal look of educating kids. That's the tip of our spear, of our ministry, Brad, if I had to name one. We want to educate the children. He said, well, yeah, but we want to do that by telling them Bible stories. Bible stories are very important. But how can they understand the stories that Jesus told if they don't understand the concept of reading a book and understanding what storytelling is? That there's fact and fiction and opinion and in fact, they don't even know that.
Yeah.
I mean, the kids we learn, single mothers, HIV infected, sex trafficked by their own families often. How do you get through that barrier? You have to educate them. Right. So they see God's love. They're able to see God's love. As one Guatemalan woman told me too, how can we tell people Jesus loves them if they're starving to death? If they have no food in their stomach and haven't eaten in 3 days? How do you do that? Well, in my opinion, Brad, you don't. You give them some shelter. You give them some food. They need those things now. They're fed, and the rain's not hitting them on the head, and they get a good night's sleep. Now you can share God's love in so many ways, and when absolutely necessary, with words.
Right.
With words, right. Okay? Just go out there and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just came back.
I did.
You made a trip down there just a week or so ago. So what was on your heart coming back, like after being down there again? You'd been back up here due to COVID and all the things that were going on. There were a lot of restrictions. Yeah. And so this was your first trip back in what, maybe close
10
to
months.
10 months. I thought it was coming up on a year. Yeah.
And things have kind of flipped where we're already planning on going back again in August and things like that. I wasn't sure what I was looking for when we went back, and we knew COVID's gone crazy down there now. It's the worst it's ever been. And, the restrictions and, the protocol and things like that. But I knew in my heart, and in Sally's heart too, we needed to go back. We needed to see it. We needed to smell it. We needed to taste the pain again.
Yep.
When people always say, well, when are you coming back to state? Well, when it stops hurting. When you can look at what those people, how they're living and the things they're going through, and it doesn't break your heart. If it's not breaking your heart anymore, then come on home, because you're immune to it now. Let God use you someplace else. And it hasn't hit yet. The first time I saw, I'm sorry, I'm a dog lover. When I see a dog limping across the street, with its ribs showing and things like that, when I see a man walk into the park with a severe limp that hasn't been fixed, when I see people dying from an abscessed tooth because they can't get dental care, okay, I don't know about you guys, but that makes me angry about the injustice that we see in this world. When I see in Guatemala a government who could care less about these people, and if we don't do what we can do to feed them, to clothe them, to house them, then shame on us. Shame on us. So when I get to that point where it doesn't anger me, I could use a lot of words right here, and you've heard me use those other words.
Yeah.
We're not going to bleep this show. Liam's giving me the look over there behind the camera. Don't you say it. Don't you say it. So I'm not going to say it. But it angers me, and I think that's what God expects of us, to be bold, to speak up, to take action against the injustice of the kingdom that he's already put in place down here. So let's do what we can do to fix it.
Yeah. So you've already said that you're not afraid to fundraise and ask for money and all of those things. But there are people who are going to hear this or maybe watch this and think, well, maybe I could help somehow. What's one of the ways in which they can help? We've already talked about check writing, but I mean, obviously, how can they give, or what's the easiest method for them? Because you kind of work together through foundations and different things.
Okay, you bring up the Foundation for the Higher Good, Chuck Worstel's not-for-profit. It's tax deductible and things like that. And God there's a story in itself. Chuck says to me one day, we've been working a lot together to get funding down to ministries in Guatemala. Why don't I just give you a separate account? You can get to the money that people send you in a hurry, and you can get it out as quickly as possible. And I smile and says, that's a pretty good idea, Chuck. And I just went along my merry way. 2 weeks later, we're back in Guatemala, and Fuego, the volcano near Antigua, erupts, kills 3,000 people. The government says there's 100. Come on. And it displaces thousands more. And all of a sudden, that made perfect sense. We were able to get the funds that people were sending from, again, mostly from mid-Missouri, building hundreds of houses, feeding hundreds of people, thousands of people, and so on and so forth. But because he brought us together, people could give to the Foundation for the Higher Good, make a difference.me, and we could get to the money in a hurry and get the money out that same day. People, what's worked, and I say this all sincerity, believe me, folks, I've seen ministries who will ask for things. People come up to me and say, yeah, I did that, but I don't feel like the money went where it was supposed to go. One very generous donor here in Columbia, Missouri, wrote it this way: when I send them pictures and stories of that's what I do, Brad, and you know that personally.
Yep.
When somebody sends money to us, I send the pictures and the story of exactly where every dime of that went. And he said, I'm glad you sent the pictures and the story, because sometimes I feel like I'm throwing money into an anonymous ocean of need. And I said, exactly right. I use a quote from a Franciscan monk who says, so you say you love the poor, then name them. That really hits home. Make it personal. Here's where it went. Here's the person that you helped. Here's the food that you sent out to this particular village. We need to make it personal.
Yeah.
It has to mean something to us. It has to hurt a little bit. And running from pain and running from hurt is not the way to go. We need to run towards it.
It's a great point to make that the Foundation for the Higher Good, 100% of every dollar that's donated, every dime goes to
no overhead.
These projects that are making a difference in people's lives there. And I think you say it best when you talk about that. It's really about getting Guatemalans and teaching Guatemalans how to help Guatemalans.
They can help. Guatemalans have a heart for their countrymen.
Yeah.
They want to help. What they don't have, they have they have the language, they have the culture, they know the pain. They're their neighbors. You know what they don't have? They don't have the funds.
Yeah.
Can we just be honest for a change? You know, oh, I just, you know, continue to pray for us. Exactly. We need them all the time. But you know what? Again, that moment of truth. God, you can have all of it. You can have my talents. You can have my time. We'll go to Guatemala, but just don't ask me for my money. For some reason, we feel like we've earned the money. That doesn't belong to God. He had nothing to do with it. That was our skill. That was our ability.
We can still drive through Starbucks every day and
Heck
buy that $4 coffee, right?
Yeah. How much are you charging for me for this? Anyway, but that's really what it comes down to is it calls for us to sacrifice. And people know because our boots were on the ground. And I assure you, if anybody's inclined to send, every dime. There is no overhead at the Foundation for the Higher Good. We laugh about that all the time. You won't see us driving a new car, and you won't see us building a nicer house down in Guatemala. It's not going to happen. But it happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be sure to put a link to makeadifference.me in the show notes and also on the YouTube on the screen and everything for people to see. Get out there and make a donation. These guys are making a difference in Guatemala. I appreciate you coming in and talking about it. You and Chuck's coming in later, and we're going to do one with him too. And
again, let me close with this too: is we're just part of the process. We accept it and we hand it right back out. We have kind of a joke over there. Chuck and I do like, how long did we hold on to that? Well, about 10 minutes because somebody else needed it. We are just part of the process, and we are no example whatsoever. I'm a sinful, broken person who God has blessed to allow me to see what the real world looks like in all its ugliness and all its pain, but to show me that He wants me to be a part of building up His kingdom here on this planet, and just so blessed. Because when that moment comes, when I take my last breath, I'm often worried about this. What will I say? What did I do with my life at that moment? And if I have that opportunity to actually be thinking at that time, and I'm going to say, well, I lived a lot of years in Guatemala, and that'll prepare me for what He has for me next and where He's going to take me next. But it's been a pleasure. And again, I'm preaching at the choir here because the man's been in the trenches with me. So, and I appreciate that and what you're doing, yourself and your group in Guatemala. It's real.
As you always wrap up everything, we're going to what?
Stay in the fight.
Stay in the fight.
Stay in the fight, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Always.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for coming in.